We're going to make some delicious braised brisket of beef. These are all the ingredients that you need. The amounts I will give you later. Onion, tomato, fresh tomato, celery, carrots, fresh thyme, bay leaves, fresh garlic, Cabernet Sauvignon, and a nice piece of brisket of beef. I'm going to season the meat first with salt and pepper. The pot that I'm going to cook it in is the pot that I am going to brown the beef in. I'm putting it in there fat side down. No reason to put any oil or anything into the skillet. That fat will render a little, and we'll have plenty of fat in there to saute the vegetables after this meat is brown. So on a fairly high flame, just brown it on both sides. It only takes a few minutes on either side. That's fine. That's the fat side. And look at all the grease that's in there. Now we put the meat side down. After the meat side browns, we're going to throw the vegetables in there. Now, why is this called braising instead of boiling? Because it's not fully submerged in a liquid. There'll be just a couple of inches of liquid in there. The water, the wine, it'll simmer. Every 15 minutes you turn it around until the meat is done. Always keeping the level of the liquid in there the same, so you might have to add water. And that's braising. You can either cook this in the oven, like this, but I'm going to do it on top with a lid nice and tight. It works the same way. And you always use the same pan that you browned it in. There is so much flavor in that pan right now. Just another minute. I like to get some nice color on it. It'll help darken the sauce when it's made. Especially when we deglaze the pan with the white wine. Yeah, that's good enough. The meat is brown. Now we add all the vegetables and everything that you saw on the board, except the tomatoes. I don't want to put the tomatoes in yet because liquid will come out of the tomatoes, preventing my vegetables here from getting some color. So we'll be sauteing this for a couple of minutes, sweating it up good. And we'll put the meat on, put the tomatoes in there, put the meat on top, put the white wine, the liquid, and we'll be ready to cook. And hopefully in about 3.5 hours, we have a beautiful piece of braised brisket of beef. Nothing better than that. The only problem with making an item like this in the house, you really smoke up the house. Usually I would do this outside on the grill, put my skillet on the grill outside, and do the whole thing out there and then bring it back into the house and finish cooking in here. But since I'm making a video, it's a little bit easier like this. As you see now, the vegetables are picking up a nice bit of color here. Picking up all of the burnt areas in the pan. Well, at this point we're going to add the tomatoes to this and saute it a few more minutes. All of this will be strained later. None of this will be eaten. And then you serve with the brisket. What goes nice on whatever you like, any kind of starch. But I find since it has a sauce to go with it, maybe broad noodles, that works well. Mashed potatoes, very nice. You could always put some of that sauce that's made on the mashed potatoes. Fresh mashed potatoes, of course. We'll give this a few more minutes. All right, That's good. Vegetables are done enough. Now this, my all-purpose skillet, which I love. I saute in here, I cook pasta in this. Works out very well. It's 11.5 inches across and 3.5 inches deep with a thick bottom. It's good for sauteing for many things. The beef fits perfect in there, that amount. Just put the red wine. Add enough water, not to cover it, because it's going to reduce. That's good enough. Now this comes to a boil, and then we put the lid on nice and tight. After it comes to a boil, we simmer it for the rest of the time. This has been simmering for about 3.5 hours. I didn't have to add any more liquid. It may seem that way, but meat shrinks. If you remember what this looked like, it filled the pot, the pan. And how do you know if it's really done? A fork like this, you push it into the thickest part. When you lift up, when it comes out easy, notice? If it doesn't come out easy, you still have to cook it longer. The next step is to strain the sauce into the fine strainer. Once this is done, all of it, notice how I do it, into a plastic container. You could push gently on the vegetables that are in there, or you could just shake it. Using a spoon, just stir it, get as much out as you can. And then discard the vegetables. Continue that until it's all done. After straining everything, 1.5 quarts went back into the pan, and I used Wondra to thicken it today. Usually I use a roux. Only reason I use this, a lot of fat is in that sauce. And usually a roux is made of some kind of a fat with flour. So this way I didn't have to skim off the fat, and just added the Wondra, and I used 1/4 cup, and there it is. Not too thick, nice and thin. Goes great on mashed potatoes and anything else. And we'll just let this simmer for a few minutes and the sauce is done. Well, one of the last steps we have to do is remove the fat from one side of the and after removing the fat, then we'll be able to slice it up. You can almost pull the fat off. Next thing we'll do is just slice up the brisket. Notice the grain is running this way. That top little piece, just ignore that as far as the grain. The grain runs this way. You slice against the grain, never with the grain. Against the grain. There's 2 nice pieces of brisket. We're going to put a little sauce on there. The sauce is on there. Serve it with mashed potatoes, noodles, vegetables, whatever you like. And there you go. Enjoy the brisket.